Every August across southern Italy, whole families take over courtyards and garages to turn hundreds of kilos of tomatoes into sauce in a single weekend. The bottles go down into cellars with no refrigeration of any kind, and they stay perfect for 12 months, often longer. Grandmothers who never sat through a chemistry class have been doing this since before anyone on Earth knew bacteria existed. But when food scientists finally studied the ritual, they found something strange. Nearly every step a Nonna performs on instinct is doing a precise microbiological job, and skipping just one of them can ruin an entire year's supply overnight. They call it la salsa, or passata day, and in regions like Campania, Puglia, and Calabria, it functions almost like a national holiday that never made it onto a calendar. Neighbors coordinate. Someone borrows a hand-cranked tomato mill. Someone's uncle shows up with a trailer of tomatoes bought directly from a farmer at sunrise. And by mid-morning, the whole street smells like warm fruit and wood smoke. A serious household might put up 200 or 300 bottles in a weekend. That's a bottle of sauce for nearly every day of the coming year, made in roughly 48 hours. The timing is the first thing outsiders get wrong. You cannot do this in June, and a Nonna would laugh you out of the courtyard for trying. The tomatoes have to come in at the dead peak of summer, late August into early September, when the fruit has spent the whole season concentrating sugar and acid under the southern sun. The classic choice is the San Marzano, a long, thin-skinned plum tomato grown in the volcanic soil near Vesuvius, prized because it carries a lot of flesh, few seeds, and very little water. That low water content matters more than flavor. Water is where spoilage lives. A watery sauce is a vulnerable sauce, and the old women knew that generations before anyone could have explained why. Then comes the step that looks cruel, the cull. Every single tomato gets inspected by hand, and the standard is ruthless. A soft spot, a split in the skin, a patch of mold the size of a fingernail, and the tomato is out. Not trimmed, out. To a beginner, this feels wasteful because 90% of that tomato looks fine. But a bruise is an open door. The damaged flesh is already hosting microbes and their enzymes, and one compromised tomato milled into a 50-liter batch seeds the whole batch, with problems that no amount of boiling will fully undo. The Nonna throwing a nearly perfect tomato to the chickens is performing quality control that a commercial cannery does with optical sorters. She does it with her thumbs. What survives the cull gets washed, split, and briefly scalded in boiling water, just long enough for the skins to loosen and the flesh to give up some of its liquid. Then everything goes through the mill, the Passa Pomodoro, a hand-cranked machine that presses the pulp through a screen and spits skins and seeds out the side. What comes out the front is passata, velvet smooth, brilliant red, and still just one single ingredient. Kids usually get the crank. It's tradition, and it's also the job that makes your shoulder ache by noon, which may explain the tradition. Now for the part that decides whether the cellar holds food or holds poison. The bottles, usually old beer bottles or glass preserving jars, saved year after year, are washed and sterilized in boiling water. Into each one goes the hot passata, a single fresh basil leaf, and for many families a pinch of coarse salt. Nothing else. The bottle is capped, and here's the move everything depends on. The filled, sealed bottles go back into an enormous drum of water, packed in with rags and old towels so they don't crack against each other, covered completely, and boiled, not rinsed in hot water, boiled, fully submerged, for a solid 30 to 40 minutes. Then the fire goes out and the bottles sit in that cooling water overnight, sometimes a full day, until they're cool enough to touch. A Frenchman named Nicolas Appert worked out this exact technique around 1810, sealing food in glass and boiling it, and he won a prize from Napoleon's government for it. He had no idea why it worked. Louis Pasteur wouldn't demonstrate germ theory for another half-century. The heat kills the microorganisms in the sauce, and as the sealed bottle cools, the contents contract and pull the lid down into a vacuum. That vacuum is the whole ball game. As long as it holds, nothing living gets in, and nothing living remains inside to grow. The next morning brings the moment every Nonna performs without ceremony, and it is the single most important safety check in the entire process. She presses the center of each lid. A sealed lid is rigid, sucked down tight, and often gave a sharp ping sometime in the night as the vacuum grabbed it. A lid that flexes and clicks under her thumb failed. That bottle doesn't get argued with, and it doesn't get a second chance in the pot. It goes to the kitchen to be eaten this week, or it goes out entirely. Why so unforgiving? Because the one organism that survives careless canning, Clostridium botulinum, produces the most potent biological toxin known, and it grows precisely where there is no air, no competition, and low acid. A sealed jar is its dream home. Tomatoes carry a built-in defense, their natural acidity, which sits right near the boundary where that organism cannot grow. Right near it, not comfortably past it. Modern varieties are bred sweeter and less acidic than the tomatoes of 50 years ago, which is why official guidance in both Italy and the United States now says to add a spoonful of lemon juice or a pinch of citric acid to each jar as insurance. Plenty of nonnas refuse. The basil leaf sparked the same argument for decades, since a fresh leaf can technically introduce contamination, yet the tradition survives because the boil afterward handles it. If you try this at home, take the lemon juice side of the argument. The Nonna's margin of safety was built on tomatoes that no longer quite exist, and that points at the real discovery hiding inside this whole tradition, the thing the food scientists kept circling back to. The recipe you came for is almost nothing. Ripe San Marzano or Roma tomatoes, culled without mercy. Scald, mill, bottle while hot. 1 basil leaf, a pinch of salt, the acid insurance. Cap, submerge, boil 40 minutes, cool overnight, press every lid. That's it, and you now have it in full. The sauce keeps for a year because of maybe 200 small decisions. The August harvest date, the merciless cull, the low water fruit, the unbroken boil, the overnight cool, the thumb on every lid. What looks like a recipe is actually a system of discipline, dressed up as a family picnic, refined by people who could not afford a single lost jar, because for a farming family in post-war Calabria, the cellar wall of red bottles wasn't a pantry aesthetic. It was the difference between eating in February and not. There's a moment that regulars of Passata Day all describe the same way. Deep in winter, months from any fresh tomato, someone opens a bottle and the kitchen suddenly smells like the last week of August. The sauce hits the pan, and a season that ended half a year ago is somehow back in the room. Nonnas don't call it food preservation. One phrase you hear over and over translates roughly to putting summer in a bottle. The grandchildren cranking the mill in the courtyard are not just making dinner for next year. They're being handed the entire operating manual, one aching shoulder at a time, which raises the question that hangs over every one of these courtyards now. The generation that learned this from scarcity is in its 80s. The generation inheriting it can buy a decent jar of passata for €2, any day, forever. Whether this survives another 50 years depends entirely on whether people decide that what's in the bottle was never really the point. So would you give up a full August weekend every single year for sauce you could buy at the store? I'm curious where you land on that, because families are quietly split over it. And the comments on videos like this one always turn into a passata day of their own. If you want more of the old techniques that turn out to be hard science in disguise, the next video digs into how Nonnas cure olives with nothing but salt, water, and patience. See you there.